Well, welcome back to another episode of the Threshold Lab, and today I'm beyond excited to welcome Chris Petersen. Chris Petersen is former active head football coach at a number of different schools, including UC Davis, Boise State, University of Washington. I know there's maybe some other stops along the way, and he retired in 2019. But today we're really excited to get to spend some time with him and dive into again the inner game of coaching. And as part of this conversation, Chris, here in a bit, we'll jump into your experiences and do some reflections. But I kind of want to start with where you're at today because you're 5 years removed from being an active head coach, and I know you've got a few different things on your plate and different projects, both within work and outside. So, what excites you the most about some of the current work you're doing or life outside of full-time coaching?
Yeah, well, it's good to be here, Zach. Thanks for having me on. I'll tell you what, probably the majority that really excites me is so many of the things that got me at the end of my career that I just couldn't make sense of. And that is really a very short version why I stepped away. But I think when I look back, 5 years ago, that was, gosh, in some ways it seems like so long ago, and sometimes it seems like it was yesterday. But when I stepped away, I did not know if I was going to coach again or not. I just knew I needed to step away to make sense of why I'm not performing at my best. I knew that. I had this job that was phenomenal on paper that I'd worked my whole life to get at an institution at the University of Washington, academics galore, uh, you know, recruited a whole staff of people that were completely aligned. We were aligned, 120 some kids that were great. There wasn't anything that was missing for me in terms of what I needed to be successful, but something was off. And so when I think about it, I stepped away at 55. And in a lot of ways, that's just when people should be hitting their stride of all the things that they've been through. And it's like, okay, I've been through the school of hard knocks now. I have a few things figured out. And for whatever, well, I know now, some of those things that they got the best of me. And instead of getting better and adjusting and adapting and growing and all those things, I was just not in a good place.
Mm, mm. What I heard kind of from you describe is you mentioned something was missing, and externally, all the stuff around you sound like it was great. It was exactly what you wanted. It's what you a lot of support, a lot of great resources, and yet what maybe was missing something internal. And so let's go back to maybe December 2nd, 2019. That was the day that you officially stepped down during your press conference at the University of Washington, and maybe walk me through like leading into that moment, like what were you feeling? What was going through your mind that
Mhm.
ultimately helped lead to that decision?
Well, I got to tell you, um, it almost happened 6 years earlier when I'd finished my run at Boise. I had a lot of the same, and we were doing really well at Boise in terms of the record. Um, but it was the same type of thing. It was like I felt myself sliding backwards as a leader, as a coach, and in turn, our team slid backwards. And at that time, I wasn't sure if it was exactly me, but something was off. And so, long story short is I'm thinking, maybe what I need is a new set of problems. And, in come the University of Washington and felt like, hey, that'd be another place because I loved Boise. I really felt I was staying there forever. But for whatever reason, um, I think that I look back and I've told this a few different times, but it's kind of embarrassing. I think, hey, what I need is a new set of problems. I'm going to take my old problems, throw away those, take on a new set of problems, and that's going to solve my problems when I'm actually the problem. But I didn't know I was the problem. That's the problem. So, anyways, so you go to come to Washington, and for 2 years, I kind of described it just as a numbing process, just trying to get your way of getting everybody aligned and doing, your way of how we do everything. And that's such a heavy lift. There's so much energy that takes to start new. And I've been in Boise for 14 years. And so you forget that, like what a heavy lift that is. And so I kind of describe the first 2 years as just kind of numbing, like you're just working 24/7, just trying to get, everybody rowing the same direction. And then year three, we start to hit our stride. Four and five, we're okay. At the end of year five, going into my sixth and final year, I had the same feelings come back that I had at Boise. And so it wasn't until like our our second to last game, we played a game on the road, had a bye, and then we were going to finish with Washington State. I'm like, I don't get this. Like, I don't know why I'm feeling like this, but I need to get away to try to get clarity. And that's all I knew. And I got a really cool Mike Leach story because the only person in the world that knew that I was going to step away after this game that we were playing on Saturday was my wife, because I'd made that decision earlier in the week. And as I'm out at pregame talking to Coach Leach, and he looks at me and he goes, small talk this, small talk that, and he looks at me and he goes, "Hey, how much longer you think you're going to keep doing this?" And I'm like, "Oh my God, we're in trouble. This guy's a mind reader. He's on to me." And I kind of, I don't know. I'm trying to figure that out. And anyway, so the next day, I decided to step away, and I'm telling you, it probably took me a year and a half to figure out what was going on. And really, so that was right before COVID. So stepped
Mhm.
away. I think I'm going to go do a bunch of traveling. I'm going to go get all these answers on how to win more, how to win better, how to coach better. And I'm going to go to like 10 different places all around the country and the world, and, you know, see some European soccer places and All Blacks. And right before I'm ready to get on a plane, COVID hits. And I'm thinking, just again, feeling sorry for myself, just my luck. Finally get freedom after 33 years of coaching with no responsibilities, and I'm going to go learn. And I get locked down. Again, like most things, for me, that was a blessing because I ended up talking to a lot more people over that period of time where I was locked down. And I would have been chasing the wrong answers anyways.
Mm.
And so by talking to more people, it got me directed on the things that were, that I couldn't make sense of, that you know, after 33 years, like I didn't recover enough, the stresses and the strains of the job. I mean, you can be doing good things and still heading down the wrong path.
Mm.
And so it wasn't like I stepped away and said, "Oh, that's what happened." Like it's been a long process and so that is some of the stuff that I do with other coaches that's pretty passionate because I think the environment's even gotten more difficult and more challenging than when I was in it. And so it's really a lot of those lessons that I've learned and then studying on that the last 5 years of how to, if I was to step back into it or somebody else that's into it, how do you share some of these lessons and help them navigate their, journey a little bit cleaner and better than I did?
Mm. Mm. I know we're gonna get into that a little bit, just kind of what that, I know that's become such a passion for you. Again, just going through it through your own firsthand experience and now how you get back to coaches out there, which we'll get into. But I'm curious and kind of going back to COVID, where you had some of those conversations lined up and you were able to have some of those conversations where it sounds like slowly clarity started to creep in for you and started to really understand what was really at play. What did those conversations sound like, or who were some of the people that you felt like really started to shine a light on what you were really going through?
Yeah. Well, there was a bunch of people, I would get, um, I'd get a little piece from this person and that person. One person that I did talk to, I think a couple times, was in my book, he's a famous retired sports psychologist, Jim Lair. He's written a bunch of books, and I'd always been a fan. One of the game-changing books that I think he's written is called The Powerful Engagement, and I read that a long time ago. And anyways, got connected to him. And so some of the things that we'll probably talk about here, but one of the things that I thought, and some of this was in his book, right? And so there a lot of these things I knew, I maybe even dabbled in, but didn't fully commit to.
Mm.
And so, anyways, some of the stuff I had been, on, but at that time, it's like we changed, and at certain times, a certain concept just connects the dots, and it's like, yes, that's the problem. That's one of the issues. And one of the things that he talked about that really resonated is society scoreboard. I think he calls it a scorecard. I call it a scoreboard, um, and our personal scoreboard. And when you're in the coaching world that I was in, everything is about society scoreboard. Nobody cares about your personal scoreboard. I mean, it is about wins. It is about approval. It is about, status. It's about promotion. It's about power. It's about rankings. It's about all those type of things. And that scoreboard can continually just keep growing. Like nobody cares about anything, outside your building other than scoreboard and how are we doing. And it's just amazing how that can just dominate your life. But we also have, our personal scoreboard. And those are the things that really has a lot of intrinsic motivation for us. Those are the events and the things we're chasing when we focus on those that we're doing for the sake of that task. All these other things, these wins, these, approval, status, money, like those are extrinsic motivators. We're really doing those things to get something else at the end of the day. And so that society scoreboard, can just continually just dominate your life. And so you lose what's important in your personal to keep you chasing the real North Star. And I'm not saying that society scoreboard is not important. It is. We are designed to hunt. We are designed to achieve. We are designed to work hard and, those type of things. But when it's all about that and we're not purpose driven, we're not living through our values. We don't even know what our values are. We're not living up to the standards that we feel are important or the principles that we want to guide our life by. You know, and it's all about the other thing is you can get off track really, really quickly.
Mm. Mm. One thing I've heard you talk about this a few times now, but one thing I hadn't really ever thought about until just now as you're describing it is right. Our personal scoreboard is infinite, right? We can achieve and live in alignment with those things at any given time, and it can evolve over the course of our lives, of the course of our careers. And it's interesting to me that oftentimes we make the society scoreboard feel kind of infinite because you achieve one thing and there's always something else. It's never good enough. It's like you're on this treadmill that really never ends and it's constantly reminding you that there's more out there. Society cares so much about not just what you've done, but okay, well, what's next? Like you hear stories about football coaches, soon as they win national championship, Nick Saban's on a recruiting call within a couple hours. And that's just one example story that's out there. And so I think it's important to remember that some of those things on society's scoreboard, they can have a shelf life, if you will, too. And so it's important to make sure that you don't put your full stock. Like you said, it matters. And your personal scoreboard is the one really where fulfillment lies.
There's no, not only you can never feed that beast enough.
Mm.
You said it. Like, I don't care how many wins you have, it's never going to be enough. I don't care how much money you make, it's never going to be enough. I don't care how many promotions you get, it's always next thing. All we do is continue to move the goalposts. That's all we do. And it might take us a month, it might take us 2 weeks, it might take us 6 months, but we're going to move them. Um, and so just to, to become aware of those things. And, again, I think the thing that I've finally come to maybe when I think about this, um, this paradigm, I used to think, well, the problem is you need to balance the things out. You need to balance, you need more balance. Like balance is always the key in life, right? But I also think about a coach's life. There's no balance in a coach's life. I mean, you might be able to balance it for 2 weeks and then you're right back into the fray and it's just hard. So then I start thinking, well, that doesn't really work. But what I do think works is to really double down and focus on your personal scoreboard and find out what really matters. Like, what is your purpose? Like, why are you coaching? What does success look like besides the wins? We get that. What are the values that you want to live through, like when things get hard? And then just like the principles that and really keep those in the forefront. And that's the lens that you see society scoreboard through. And I think that brings a lot of clarity to both those, what's going on in the world that these coaches are going to live in. And it creates more fulfillment. You can be more process oriented. Um, because when you just think, hey, once if I can just win a championship, if I can just win that league championship, or if I can just get to the college football playoffs, if we can win a BCS game, I'm good. You're not good. It's just a matter of time. It's next. And you're sitting there going, wait a minute, why does this not feel right? And so, yeah, so I think there's a lot of things that, you're exactly right what you're talking about.
Yeah. Well, I think one thing that's beautiful about that metaphor, that personal scoreboard, is that that really helps build a foundation for your identity, right? Like what's important to you, like you
Mm.
mentioned, your purpose, your values, your why, like that is really the foundation. And that's you creating that for yourself as opposed to letting somebody outside determine what that is for you. Like I don't get to tell Chris what his personal scoreboard is and no one else gets to tell me what mine is, but that's the beauty of it is we can all have our own version. And I really like what you mentioned is making that the first lens or filter through which we define success.
Yeah, I will say this, and you hit on the key word where probably all of this thing starts is identity. I mean, I think one of the biggest lies that coaches tell themselves is, coaching is what I do. It's not who I am. I think that's garbage for 90% of the coaches that I know. And it's really hard to not get caught up in that trap. We spend every waking moment doing this thing called coaching, and our whole lives are there. And for us to act like and not get our identity wrapped around that over time, I think takes a lot of work, a lot of skill, um, a lot of clarity. But when you can separate that, and you can't do it by a conversation or just knowing it, I think you have to put in intentional, legitimate work, and it starts there with your identity.
Mm, mm. I'm curious for you, you mentioned it being almost like a trap. Like we get in the trap of doing and it's like there's the adage that we're all human beings, we're not human doings, but those in the coaching profession more often than not kind of fall under the latter. And I'm curious from the conversations you've had or your own experiences, what do you feel like makes stepping out of that grind kind of culture and that doing culture so difficult for coaches and leaders?
I think that's a great question. And I'm not sure I've thought deeply enough about that because I feel like I am kind of a rarity. Like I stepped away and said, I'm not, I might be more passionate now about coaching than I was when I was coaching because I feel like I've learned and got so much more clarity and perspective. But the reason that I don't step back into it is because I know what it takes. And you live your life so narrow
Mhm.
to go do it the way that it needs to be done. And I just don't want to live my life that narrow right now. but I always kind of think I'm an anomaly. Like I'm different on this. So many guys get out of it for whatever reason, or they get fired. They're just dying to get back in. They can't stay away. It's it's like the mafia. Once you're out, they're going to suck you back in sooner or later. You can't stay out. And so I don't. I mean, there's so much. I guess to answer your question off the top of my head without thinking deeply about it, there's so much that's rewarding about it. There's that teaching component. The relationships are intense. We want to help people. The strategy of the game, the competition of the game, the energy that comes with all this when we're going to play for real. That stuff is really intense. And the dopamine hits that you get throughout your day and year and all that, like you can't get that anywhere else. Like that people that try to get, well, just that's the real world and I don't feel the same. And there's going to be a trade-off to everything you do in life, right? And I think when you step out, there's a lot you're going to miss. And
Mm,
so I think that's what they do. That's how they grew up. That's what they know. And they think they can be away from it. And then all of a sudden life becomes kind of boring and stale to them. And I need to get back into the fray.
hmm No, I appreciate that answer in a lot of ways. And I think you're spot on with just so many coaches that I know I talk to, what got them into coaching are, the passion for the game, the desire to teach and share and learn and build relationships. And to your point, when they get in the coaching profession, those are the things that are oftentimes the parts of the job that they love the most. There's all the other stuff that comes with it sometimes that can create, those feelings of burnout. And again, sometimes where society's scoreboard all of a sudden looms larger and bigger for us. And so I'm curious, some of this you may have started to become more aware of as you were coaching, and maybe some of it's become more clear as you've stepped away. But when you think about your own personal scoreboard now, what does that look like for you? What's most important to you on your own scoreboard?
Well, I think it's the things that I just mentioned. They're always there. They sometimes can get muted in this life in the fast lane. So I think I'm very much more aware of what is my purpose. Like if I'm going to spend time with other coaches, like I'm not just doing it like blindly. Like why am I doing this? And what is my purpose to work with them? It's on that personal scoreboard too, it is about relationships. That's what life is. At the end of the day, when people talk about legacy, I've been thinking a lot about this, not for myself at all, but like that word legacy. I've heard that on TV, and this quarterback's going to leave this legacy, and this guy's going to leave that legacy. And I'm thinking, that's really an important thing. But what are we talking about? And usually they're talking about like championships, and we won these games. That's not the legacy that I think about in all my journeys and where I am now. I think the legacy is about the relationships that we created, the positive impact that we made on each other, and what that, because that is only going to get better and intensify like over time. Those memories grow and get better. Sometimes, the harder it was, the better the story, and the good times are even feel better now. But I think the legacy is about relationships. That's what I think the number one thing when we're talking about legacy. When we're in the battle, so to speak, it's all about winning. And it's going to be about that championship. And everybody says this. You think back to when you played in college, or some of the early wins we had as a coach, and a championship here or there. I don't even, I mean, I remember it, but not really. But I got some really good stories on some people and some of these things we went through together. Like that's the legacy.
Mm, mm. I hear that loud and clear with what you're describing, just the importance of that being so center to something that you value, right? Front and center in that scoreboard. And with that too, I think one thing that we've talked about this in the past is that, like, before you can lead others or build connections with others, it's obviously important to lead yourself, right? And you already mentioned Jim Lair and his work, and we've talked before about, there's these finite resources that we have as coaches, time, energy, focus, those types of things. So I'm curious for you what role those have played in your perspective on those as you coached and now as you support other coaches, how are those showing up in your conversations?
Yeah, I mean, some of the things we're talking about, they just seem almost cliches, where you just said, you got to think about leading yourself first. Everybody's heard that. Young people have heard that. And I just think this. I just think back of all the things that I missed. Like I think about when we, young coaches and getting into it. I think most of us are not taught how to teach. I think it takes 10 years of like going through like, you're good at a sport and were a good people person or something. It's like somebody's that, hey, I want that guy on my staff. And then you're figuring out how to teach, how to coach, how to lead. We're not really taught these things. I think about this. Like, think about the last 15 years of all the information that is out on leadership. And I mean, there's more books on leadership and how to do this thing. But yet, when I look around, I'm not seeing a peripheral, explosion of these great leaders. Now everybody's got this. I'm seeing no more good leaders than I saw 15 years ago.
Mm,
And I kind of asked, like, I'm like, well, why is that? And there's multiple reasons. But I think one of the things is that, we think leadership has to do with us like leading these other people and controlling other people and getting people to do things the way that we see them. And that is not it, in my opinion. It starts like I think this, and I think we've talked about this. Like I just go back to this again, kind of little cliche of the paradox of leadership. The paradox of leadership is rule number one. Yeah, it is about others. It's about service and sacrifice for others. It's about aligning and uniting others. It's about building confidence and helping build self-esteem in others. It's about earning or winning influence. It's not about control. Like at the end of the day, do I influence about, building trust and so I can maybe influence some people. So that's rule number one. But rule number two on the paradox is really, it's only about you.
mm,
And that's why I think so many, you don't see it because it takes so much hard, intentional work for you to really be able to get better, to grow, to bring your best self to work and then give those gifts away. Like I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I think about, so you got on this one hand, it's about others and then it's about you. And I think when I think about it, it's about you. It's about, these self skills. It's about self-awareness, knowing yourself. It's about self-discipline, controlling yourself. We think we're going to control all the others. We can barely control ourselves. It's about self-confidence. It's about believing in yourself. And then it's about values. Like, what are the values that you truly want to live through as a leader? And I just think about how hard it is to show up every day as our best self. And that's to me what this is about. You showing up as your best self, supporting others, and giving away your best gifts in the support and service of others. And you can't give away that which you don't possess.
mm,
So you got to get yourself right. Like that's the biggest, hardest thing there is. We talk so hard about developing our players, developing our staff, but we're missing the first step of this because it's also the hardest step. I don't have time for that. I don't have time to think and reflect on these experiences I've been through. I don't have time to meditate. I don't have time to journal. I don't have time to get enough sleep. I don't have time to eat right. I don't know how you're going to be your best if you're not doing all those things. It's got to start there, and then everything else builds from there.
Mm, mm. That was great. I think what a powerful line when you say you can't give away what you don't possess. And again, just it's so difficult. Again, there's all sorts of adages and cliches, pour you can't give pour from an empty cup and all those things that we've heard for time now. And something that you shared at the very beginning that I'm curious if it kind of ties in here is you mentioned how, early on you were hearing some of these things or reading about some of these things, and you were like, yeah, like I believe in that. Like that's important, like I get that. And the end was, but I didn't do it, or I didn't commit was kind of the term you use. And I'm curious whether it's been for yourself or others that you've seen, like what have you seen help get people to commit to truly leading themselves first?
That's a great question. And um, I'll say this. Um, what I think is people really only change for two reasons. One out of inspiration or out of desperation. And it's usually out of desperation. It's awesome when it's out of inspiration. And that does happen. You get motivated, you're growing, you see the results, and you're like, okay, this is starting to come to life. And you get more motivated. But I just think about how hard it is for us to change. Like everybody loves to talk about change. They love to talk to their team about we got to change, we got to grow, we got to adapt. That's what it is. We're that, in this environment. And so, who's about change? Everybody holds their hands up. Okay, who wants to change themselves? Nobody's holding their hand up. And so, that's how I kind of think about that. And it's just such hard work to continually grow and change ourselves. I think we underestimate how important that is and really how hard it is and how much time it takes.
Mm,
And so it's just easy, like those three things right there, it's easy to just kind of blow off. Like you can write down, I got three, four values. I really believe it. I got a purpose statement. Okay, I got a game plan for my. If you're not like, as focused on your personal self as you are building your team, improving your staff, if you're not as myopically focused on yourself, then I don't think it's going to really happen. Because I kind of did all that. I was kind of dabbling. At times I was good and and it's never going to be perfect. I get that. But it has to be a fundamental commitment that, like, no, I get this. I see this different and it's me. And I'm going to try to be a master of my craft of being this, game-changing leaders, like I like to call it, because I think about that. Like, I think about the people that changed my lives the most. I
mm,
would say they're game-changing leaders. They actually changed the trajectory of my life. Let's not even be that dramatic. Like why this game-changing lead. Let's just say, you don't have that connection or that time. Okay, what else is a game change? Well, one, they usually change our team's performance. Like the best that I've been around leaders, they make us better as a team. They bring us together. Maybe they didn't change my life, but I've never been on a good team that didn't have like a game-changing leader. Let's not even go there. Let's just say we don't have enough talent, to be really, really good. We're just not there yet. How about just making the process enjoyable? That's what a game changer, like it keeps it in perspective. One of the requirements of improvement is joy and fun. You take that away, kids and all of us stop improving pretty quickly. And I think that, game changing leaders, they're going to do one of those. They're going to change lives. They're going to change your team's performance, or at a minimum, they're just going to make it more enjoyable to
mm.
come work together.
I think something that you're hitting on that I really like is I think it's a very powerful question for leaders or coaches to reflect on is like, how do you want your players to feel being led by you? What do you want them to feel? How do you want them to leave not only practices and games, but also, hey, 10 years from now, what do you want that lingering feeling to still be? And I'm curious for you, in your own coaching career, what was that you ultimately wanted players to feel being led by you?
Yeah. Somebody asked me, I don't know, it might have been 10 years ago, that question. They say, what do you think it feels like to be coached by you? And I just stopped in my tracks. And I'm like, sometimes pretty good. Other times, man, I'm kind of embarrassed, you know, just the competitiveness, the lack of poise. Like I always think about this, the competitiveness that can overtake us on the field, And I've come to learn this, like when I hear things, iffy things about a coach, treating other people, treating teammates, treating peer to peer. And one of the things that'll come up, and if you address it, they'll say, "Oh yeah, I'm just really competitive." And I just like that to me means, oh, I'm trying to think the PG version, you're an a-hole. Like that's just how they hide behind, I'm a jerk, Like real great competitors don't treat their teammates that way. They don't treat other people like that. Great competitors, you know. A lot of us think we're great competitors and we're not lifting up our teammates because to do this the way we need to do it, if we're trying to be great, we need our teammates. We need each other. We can't do it alone. And so I always think about that. But yes, that question like is a great question. What does it feel like to be coached by you? Maybe when you're at your best or at your worst. Like that's a real eye-opening question. I always wanted our guys to feel like they were empowered, accountable, and committed. And so, how do you create an environment that promotes that? And, a lot of it comes with trust and modeling the way and those type of things. But, the other thing that I think that was something we kind of hung our hat on that we got involved with a long time ago was this philosophy called Built for Life, where we were trying to repurpose the sport experience, build men of character, teach elite life skills, championship teamwork, game-changing leadership, all those concepts. And it's a little bit like Trojan horse values. They're not really wanting to hear about elite life skills. They're not even really wanting to hear about championship teamwork, especially when it gets hard. But you can, when you're talking about sports and you're talking about what we need to do and how you can improve your game and how this team can get better, they'll pay attention to that. But it's the same skills that are going to take to be successful in life. And some of those kids would figure it out by the time that they left us. He's talking about a lot more than sports. And I could tell that they appreciated it. This was the irony of it. Like sometimes you sit there and I could see the look in their eye, like, oh, here we go again. Here he goes again. But I also felt like they then let us coach them. I hate the word harder, like with passion and they trusted us more. We could push them a little bit more because they felt like this isn't just all about winning games. They do care about us, about some of what's going to happen after this place. So half of them would figure that out. The other half would not till a handful of years later. And they'd go, Coach, all that culture stuff and all that teamwork stuff and all those, like, it's the same stuff that we're talking about in work. And they're asking me about it. And so we always felt like that was really an important piece. And I think coaches still miss this because it takes a lot of time and energy to spend on that when you almost don't have enough time as it is in your day that these guys are operating in.
Mm, mm. It's such a powerful perspective and reflection. You mentioned wanting players to feel empowered, right? And I think a piece of that is I almost envision it like, if somebody drew the timeline of their life, you're going to be an athlete, a student athlete for a very small piece of that. But what you're really talking about, built for life, is like, hey, these skills, these concepts, these attributes that aren't just about high performance on the gridiron. These are relevant for who you will become in your families, in your jobs, all those other pieces of it that ultimately, again, it's you're a human first. You're not just an athlete. And I think I really like how that was such an emphasis in that environment and culture that you were trying to create, because that aligns directly with trying to create an environment where people feel empowered,
Yeah.
supported, and challenged. So,
It was interesting. There's so many stories and pieces that went into this, like why it resonated with myself and our coaches so much. But another story was this. We would go to all these camps as coaches, the satellite camps and football camps and looking at players and recruiting and all those type of things. And at every one of these camps, there was a time where you had to say something about academics. That was part of being legal to have a camp. You had to give a little academic talk. And every coach would almost say the same thing. They'd say, if plan A doesn't work out, what we're doing, football, basketball, whatever, you need to have a plan B. And I would hear this from camp to camp to camp. And I'm thinking, this is the craziest thing I've ever heard. Of course, football's not going to work out. This isn't even plan A. This is plan B. We just happen to be doing it first. Plan A is the rest of your life. Even if you go to the NFL and play 10 years and you're an all pro and you make more money than you can ever spend in your lifetime, you're going to be 32 years old and now you got 60 years left. What are you going to do with this? That is plan A. There's that stat that's out there that just keeps resonating, and I don't think it's changed. After 3 years of being in the NFL, if you meet the minimum, the league average is 3.2 that the average player plays. Tom Brady's and all those guys, like they skew it, and you see those and you think they play forever. Most play 3 years. If you play 3 years, within 3 years of coming out, you're either 86% of the NFL players are either broke, addicted to something, or divorced.
Mhm.
And so when I keep hearing that, I'm like, yeah, that's exactly the point. We're creating these really great football players that have no clue how to do life.
Mm, mm. I love that. We started this conversation with things around coaching identity, leading yourself, your values, scoreboard, creating a game plan for your life as a coach, all these great things. And now we kind of shifted a little bit here into that environment that you worked really hard at with your staff and creating. And as we kind of approach the back end of this conversation, the last little theme here that I'd love to kind of dive into here is you mentioned earlier legacy. And I think a part of a head coach's legacy in particular is the coaches around them, right? And who studies under them and the opportunities that they get and so on. So I'm kind of curious for you. I believe great coaches are multipliers, and you can learn a lot, obviously, about when you look at their coaching trees. So when you look at yours, what are you most proud of as you reflect back on your head coaching career?
Yeah, already touched on it. It's hands down the relationships. I think about the players. There's been so many of the players, and that's been a huge part of, um, fulfillment and helping those guys not just be chase their football dreams and all those type of things. But I think about our staff and all the coaches that I was blessed to be around, and most of those guys are still in it. I'm the one that's out. These are all guys that are still going pretty good. And I think that, we had a different way of talking to kids, even way back. We were never, and I shouldn't say never, because, you always fall off the standard now and again, and you regret it, and that's not how you want to coach and treat kids. But for the most part, we were not into this old school, um, dog cussing kids, treating them hard, my way or the highway. Like I felt like we were kind of a little bit ahead of the curve, where we were really trying to create an environment where these kids we wanted to work our tail off and never be, outworked and all those things. But we wanted them to like football and like being with us. And so all those guys that I had the beautiful opportunity to create relationships with, the coaches, their style of coaching, I thought was always different than a lot of places that I would go watch others coach. There's nothing to this day that's even more, and there's a couple things that are super inspiring to me in my life, and one is what I would call a game-changing coach. Just their vibe, their tone, how they talk to the kids, how they support the kids. You can feel it's not about them, it's about the kids. They're elevating the kids, they're letting the kids figure it out. They're a guide on the side. It's not about them. When the kid has a failure or setback, it's not a direct reflection that my identity's so tied into your performance that it's like, and that's hard to do. And we all have been there on occasion, myself included. But that's where it goes back to this identity, and it's about us. So we can be our best and truly support these, whether it's other coaches you're around or the athletes that you're with, to help them, because everybody's journey, like you said, is different, and everybody's different spot in this journey. And one thing's not going to work with another guy, and trying to figure that out, that's what's best for them. Like, I was around a lot of coaches that embodied that type of thinking.
Mm. In an ideal world, I'm sure selection, obviously, really important, right? Getting the right people in from not just a player standpoint, but a coach and staff standpoint. And I'm curious, once they're in the building, the environment you create for coaches to grow. So I'm curious, like for you, when it came to developing your staff and creating game-changing coaches, what was your process for that?
Mhm. We spent a lot of time talking about what our process does look like and how it does start with us. And, everything from the type of teachers we're going to be, we would film our meetings and tear them apart, because most of us are not taught like a great sixth grade teacher is, that goes to school to present, and we figure it out. And so we're trying to accelerate that curve right there. And so, like, what a great teacher looks like, um, what a coach looks like. How do we make this simple for these guys? What are the true fundamentals of your position? Okay, then what are the different techniques? Most coaches don't know the difference between a fundamental and a technique, huh? And so to separate those out and then to build on that and keep the game very simple so these kids can play fast. We want to make it complex to our opponent, but it's really simple for these kids. Takes a lot of skill to simplify things that can get complicated. And then, and then the leadership component. What does a really big time game changing leader look like? Because that is how they're going to learn from us the most. Not what we say, it's what we do, how we model the way. And
Mm.
what does that look like where every day you show up a certain way, and that is going to bleed off onto them over time.
Mm, I know you've mentioned in the past the importance of, modeling the standard. And I think that rings so true here when we're talking about modeling the values, modeling your own growth and development. And I appreciated your sentiment around simplicity is helpful for clarity too, right? Clarity for the players and just getting that alignment.
Simplicity is the ultimate in sophistication. We would have that in our meeting. Like that, it really is. Like, to be simple, it but you're not so simple that there's complexity to it. Like,
Hmm.
one of the biggest compliments anyone could give, any of our teams is like, man, when I watch you, it just looks so simple. Hey man, I love, like, God bless you. Like, that's one of the best compliments because it's not that simple, but the kids have made it look simple because they're so skilled at it now. But it comes from those assistant coaches, certain way of teaching the game.
Mm. There's a coach that I've worked with who I think beautifully kind of said it where as a coaching group and as a staff, we'll work behind the scenes with the complexity of it. So that
Right.
way, once it's communicated to the players, we'll make it simple for you. But behind the scenes, we'll do all the heavy lifting. We'll kind of distill this down to what's most helpful to you? What's the lowest common denominator for you to go out there and do your job with clarity and full engagement?
And that takes hours and hours and a lot of expertise to get that done. That's what I think a lot of people miss. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, we all want to be simple, and then all of a sudden it's not so simple, so not everybody can do that.
Yeah. The last thing I wanted to ask you about here is I know some of your current work is being still wrapped around coaching and being a mentor and in essence a coach for others that are still active in this game. And I'm just curious, what advice would you give coaches out there on maybe the benefits of having your own coach?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think it's interesting because I think all coaches, their initial reaction is a kind of a pushback, like, wait, what? I'm a coach. I don't need a coach. And here's another thing that I dabbled in. Like I talked to a person or two that was outside. I just didn't know another coach that was like out of the game, but into coaches. So the business world's much further along than the coaching world. All the CEOs got a, whatever, a personal coach. I don't really like it's to me, it's more of a thinking partner. Like you still got to come up with your own answers. And so it's not about somebody giving you the answers. Well, do this or do that. Like that doesn't work. We have to figure this out ourselves. But you can have somebody that's got a different perspective, that asks really great questions, that makes you think, that challenges you. Is that really the best way? And so I think every coach, especially the young ones, and sometimes the younger coaches are better than the older coaches. They're finding mentors and learning a lot. And then we get along through our journey and our path, and we got all the answers and we got it figured out. And to me, the higher you climb, so to speak, the tougher the job is. That you're getting into territory where there's not as many people that are in that arena that will even share answers with you or ideas with you. And so I think it's really, really important that you always have some people like, and I think about mentorship too. Like I think about a one up, one aside, one down. So who's the person that's in front of you by a few years that you can always rely on, ask great questions to, get their counsel? Who's a peer? Or, again, doesn't have to be one each way, but like who's some peers that are like in it with you that you can talk to? And then most importantly, who's behind you a handful of years? They have a really unique perspective that sometimes we forget or we miss. And so even for ourselves, like this one up, one aside, one down mentorship thing or coaching thing is another way that I think is really powerful to look at it.
I really believe in the importance of being intentional with language, and I love what you shared there with like almost viewing it as more like a thinking partner. And I think in particular that word partner is very powerful, right? It's ultimately working, it's co-creating the relationship with that person, where they want to go, what are their goals, and I think you've said it well with asking great questions. I almost think of it like part of a thinking partner or extra coach's job is to figuratively hold up a mirror to that coach and ask great questions that allow them to find their own answers. Because I think oftentimes when you pull the layers back, a lot of coaches know the right answer deep down within. They usually have it. It's just sometimes, again, you mentioned earlier that fog or that lack of clarity that can sometimes set in when we're in the day to day, and just having an extra set of eyes there to maybe help create some freedom and give us a new way to look at it, I think is just a really powerful, again, a tool, a resource to have.
I get inspired myself when we kind of go through some of those processes and these coaches come up with some of these answers that I would have never thought of. Just me asking a question or getting like what they come up with is like, oh wow, that is powerful. I wouldn't have come up with that, and so I think that, and so I think one of the things when you are working with somebody, the other thing that I do think of myself as, more so than a coach is the thinking part. But I also think of myself as like, I want to build, and this is such a key word in life, in team building, in everything, is trust. We could talk a long time about that word, but I'm always trying to build trust with the people that are really important in my life. And so if I'm going to work with a coach, I really am going to work super hard on building trust for numerous reasons. But one of the main reasons is too, because not only do I think of myself maybe as a thinking partner, I'm an accountability partner. So if you tell me this is what I really want to do, are we sure this is what you really want to do? This is what I want to do. Then I'm not letting up. Okay, when are we doing this by? What's the process going to look like? And I'm going to be that one that's going to keep just like, now if you change your mind and cool, this is your life. But if you tell me this is something you want to do that you think is going to help you with that, like, I think everybody needs to be held accountable. There's just a good, like accountability, like we're going to hold them accountable. That has such a negative connotation. Like, what's that looking like? And I don't think it's negative at all done right. It's like, that's one of the most, because we all need, like, we're human beings. We just want to slide in that comfort zone, and not go into that growth zone that is so awkward and so hard and so just feels not good. Okay, if that's the case, somebody needs to hold us accountable to like get into that space and grow through it.
You need that other person to help stretch you, right? And just step into, like you said, lean into that discomfort that's so easy for us all to kind of, we just, even just subconsciously migrate towards. And so
We're just
I love
we're
that sentiment.
we're wired for softness, man. We
Yeah.
are, or our comfort, like it is softness,
Yeah.
right? I mean, some people say it's a comfort zone. We just are like,
Hmm.
but the crazy thing about that is we're not, we think we are, but only for a short time. We get uncomfortable if it's like we're not being challenged and we're not growing. That's the weird thing. We think like we always want, when we get into that growth space, it doesn't feel great, so we want to get out of it. But
Hmm.
if we stay out of it and we're not growing, like when we really take time for self-awareness, to self-reflect here a little bit, we're not liking that either.
Mm, mm. Have you read The Comfort Crisis by chance? Have you read
I
that
don't
book?
think I have.
You might like it. You might like it. The cliff notes of it is it talks about how we've now created this world built around comfort. And I actually heard something the other day that was really interesting. It was a study that he references in his book where if you put stairs next to an escalator, 98% of people take the escalator,
Yeah,
right? Like there's
yeah,
2% of the population that
yeah.
lean into something that again is literally and figuratively uncomfortable per se. And yet we also know that's usually the path we have to choose over and over again to really get to where we want to go.
I think that's a great analogy because when you think about it, like everybody knows the importance of health in our lives, physical health. We need to work out. We need to move, right? I mean, I don't know if there's anybody on the planet that doesn't know that by now. And so how easy would it be to just take those stairs? Really hard unless we make that fundamental commitment that you're talking about. That if I say, okay, every time I come to a stairs, that's part of my habit. I'm going to build that habit and it's going to become a part of my identity that I take stairs. Like if I can get 30 stairs in this coming out of the airport instead of going the escalator, I'm doing that. It seems so easy, but if we don't bring that intentionality to that, it's not easy.
Mm, mm. And it ties earlier, you mentioned all the different self-confidence, self-awareness, self-discipline, right? That and just that
Mhm.
relentless choice over and over. I really that word choice just I think is so important to come back to. And um, I heard it even the other day where there's a difference. Sometimes there's like this illusion of control that so many people seek. And I've heard it reframed as like think of it more as a choice, right? When you think of it as choice, that's more associated with like freedom and again and being empowered, whereas in reality, chasing control, we that's a whole nother can to dive into.
That's
But
right. That's exactly right. Yeah. And I mean, when you think about that self-discipline, and again, we could go down this rabbit hole, but like that to me is freedom.
mhm,
Once you establish those habits, you're actually creating freedom, that investment in your future, that's freedom, you know, by being disciplined to take 30 stairs, you know? I mean, it's kind of wild, like how we can miss that by just not making that commitment. Anyways,
yeah,
yeah.
no, that's great. My very last question here, Chris, and I'm so grateful again for your time and the conversation. And although we've had several conversations now over the last couple years or so, I'm finding I'm still learning every single conversation from you. So I'm super
You and me
appreciative
both.
of it. And you mentioned earlier, one of the questions I wanted to ask you was some iteration of, is there a question or challenge you find yourself still trying to address or learn about as it relates to leadership or coaching? And I think you actually kind of hit on it earlier. You mentioned the word legacy and how you've been reflecting on that more and more and what that really means. And I'm curious for you, and I know this might not be fully formulated quite yet, but what's the legacy that you're hoping to leave?
Yeah, it's funny I even brought that up because I just wanted to talk about relationships because I don't think about that at all. Like I'm not worried about my legacy. I'm just not. And I mean that 1000%. I think about the relationships, and so if that's the legacy that we're taught, like that to me, and everybody, I don't know, you just being out the last 5 years, and again, we all hear about the personal score with the relationships and values and principles and faith and growth and mindfulness and all those things. I just don't know if there's anything more important in this world than relationships. And it doesn't mean, and it doesn't matter. Like if you have three or five really good ones that are just your family, and a couple. I mean, thinking the more you study and research this stuff in terms of health and happiness and fulfillment, I think all these researchers put that one thing at the top of the chart. And I think it just takes us to get older, to be able to create time and space to reflect on those type of things, to create some history and look back and go, they're right. Like that's the most important thing is, these relationships that we make along our journey. And, did we do some good for some of those people that we got to spend time around with? I don't know. I don't know if there's much more important than that.
Yeah, you invest in the relationships, the legacy takes care of itself. Yeah.
Amen.
Perfect. Well, Chris, again, I'm so grateful again for all your time, and this has been a great conversation. We've covered a lot of ground in it. I know this is a passion for you, not only with your firsthand experiences, but also so many different people that still come to you for guidance, mentorship as a thought partner. So I'm just super grateful for you taking some time to share with those listening.
My pleasure. And the reason that I'm so into it is because I learn, I mean, that's it, right? I'm still growing and learning. And I mean that since when, you said a handful of things to me that's really got me my brain going and going down. And so, like I said, if there's some things that I've been through that I can help people think through, I don't have the answers, but maybe we can think through some things,
We
then
can
that's
we
awesome.
can work together and see what
That's
we
right.
can solve, and we'll probably come up with some new problems or new questions to answer along the way.
Amen.